Hi, everyone. Welcome to our new interview series where we're going to be talking to members of the 2023 CWI Summer Conference. I am McKenna White. I am a student fellow for the Civil War Institute, and today I'm going to be talking with Dr. Lorien Foote. Dr. Foote, you are a professor of history at Texas A&M University and also a notable author. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So speaking of your books, I know you just published a new one entitled Rites of Retaliation, Civilization, Soldiers, and Campaigns in the American Civil War. Can you talk a bit about how you arrived at this book project and then also some of the larger historiographical conversations that you're contributing to with it?
Sure. I came to this project out of my previous book. I think every book leads to the next book. I'd been writing about the mass escape of prisoners of war in South Carolina and North Carolina in the last winter of the Civil War. And one reason for this escape is that a lot of officers had been moved to the city of Charleston to be put under fire of Union guns as an act of retaliation. And I thought that's really interesting. And so I started looking up more incidents of retaliation and just found that it was pervasive throughout the American Civil War. Nearly every military campaign involved a ritual of retaliation where commanders tried to negotiate, what does civilized war look like? And if you're not playing by the rules, then we're going to retaliate against you. And I found that it was a huge topic that deserved, a full-length book treatment. So that was what led me to the topic. And really, the book is about how Northerners and Southerners thought about civilization and what civilized war should be. My book is a lot about how culture impacts how societies fight war. So one of my kind of historiographic conversations is how do we understand the relationship between military action and the culture of the people who are fighting a war. And then there's a lot in there also about violence and how violence during the Civil War was negotiated, why it escalated in some places and de-escalated in other places. So that contributes to a conversation with recent books like Aaron Sheehan's Dean's The Calculus of Violence, or an older book, Mark Grimsley's book about hard war. And then there's a lot in this book also about Black soldiers. And so it contributes to a historiographic conversation about the role of Black soldiers in the American Civil War and the Confederacy's treatment of them. And then I think finally, it's a book that tells a lot about the military history of the Department of the South, or from the Confederate structure, the Department of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And we don't have that much military literature on that department. So that I think makes a pretty important intervention.
It sounds like an amazing book, and I saw that it's just won an award. So yes. Congratulations for that.
Thank you. Yeah, the Organization of American Historians Civil War and Reconstruction Book Award. I was very excited, obviously.
Speaking of that, are there any connections between this book and your ongoing digital history project, which is called Fugitive Federals?
So there's some connection in that much of Rites of Retaliation deals with the issue of prisoners of war, because both the Union and the Confederacy used prisoners of war as objects of retaliation. They were enemies that you had in your hands that you could use to threaten the other side. If you don't change your behavior, if you don't issue an order taking back this other order, we're going to retaliate on your prisoners of war. That connection is important and helping us understand the experience of prisoners of war and why they were so desperate to escape.
And then my last kind of segue question is about the summer conference. You're giving several talks this year. I noticed that one specifically was a dine-in opportunity about animals in the war. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why did you choose that to talk about this summer?
Yeah, I'm super excited about this dine-in. I chose that because my current book project is about the role of dogs in 19th century American military history and the role of dogs in helping us understand warrior culture. So I'm writing a book that looks at the Second Seminole War, the Pawnee Dragoon expeditions, and then the American Civil War. And I recently published a chapter in Earl Hess's volume that just came out, Animal Histories of the Civil War. And I wrote a chapter about dogs in the Department of the South. And what I was so excited when I did the research to find is a lot of what we think about animals in the Civil War, we think about horses and mules and their important role in transporting armies. And then we think of, you know, regimental mascots, the dogs and the cats and the roosters and the pigs and the eagles. And but I was shocked to discover how important militarily dogs are. In the Department of the South, they are the police force for enslaved people when Confederate conscription draws white men out of society and into the military. Confederate conscription can work because there are so many dogs that are used to police enslaved people. They're used in military prisons. So, you know, Union soldiers recognize the importance of dogs and kill them by the thousands during Sherman's march through Georgia. So I think people are going to be surprised to realize how vital animals were, not just as military transportation or as cavalry, but in other areas. So in the Dine-In, we're going to read, for example, a Confederate War Department investigation of why Confederate pickets, when there was a Union gunboat attack, why Confederate pickets left their stations and went to get dogs and bring dogs to the scene of the action instead of, you know, firing their guns themselves. And we're going to read testimony from Henry Wirtz's trial, you know, the commander at Andersonville, where every single witness, both on the Confederate side and the Union side, every single witness was asked about dogs at Andersonville. And we're going to read some of the testimony about dogs. And then we're also going to read a diary where a medical doctor talks about how he takes his dog on his rounds almost as kind of a medical service animal to soldiers who are sick. So I'm really excited about the documents, and I think it's going to open people's eyes to things that they hadn't really realized before about animals.
Well, it sounds so fascinating. And I'm sure that everyone who attends your Dine-In will learn so much about this. So Dr. Foote, thank you so much for joining me today and doing this interview. And I really look forward to hopefully hearing more from you in the future, maybe even at the conference.
Thank you, McKenna. And I really look forward to seeing everyone in Gettysburg.